to think again as regards governance. Governance is primarily a thing of the total community. We need, say, a constitution for the North American continent, not simply a constitution for humans on the continent, where that which is not human has no inherent rights under our governance system. We need an education, an ecozoic education, where children would be educated and become literate primarily in the planetary process, in the natural world, not primarily learn to read books written by humans. They would think first of the book of the universe, or the book of the earth. So they would first be given this larger context of education and the larger context of skills. And this is one of the difficulties with the electronics thing. But again, the electronics process of giving them their nature experience through television and through electronics media is not the way in which it must be done. That can perhaps play a role, but this must be an immediacy of the child with the reality of the world about them, so that they must be introduced to the natural world in this immediacy of personal presence to the reality. We're beginning to lose our sense of the reality of the thing by artificial, contrived substitutions. I'm told that in Japan that you can, or in some countries, that they've worked out the electronics so that if you want to have an experience of the natural world, you go into a booth and you put in your quarter, and you can have a sylvan scene or a woodland scene, and you can hear the water flow, you can hear the singing of the birds, you can see the flowers bloom, you can have all this experience through the contrived processes of electronics.
This concludes Side B.
And that was the first part of today's presentation of the Collected Thoughts of Thomas Berry, Week 2, a bit of a recap from last week. Right now, it's now 11:58 in the studios of WRPI Troy, where we're in our second week in this time slot of a special presentation, the Collected Thoughts of Thomas Berry, in anticipation of Father Berry's appearance October 25th, 2003, at the First Congregational Church, Main Street, Stockbridge, Massachusetts. A little after 10 o'clock that morning, he'll be giving a presentation as part of a larger presentation called The Commons, Rights and Responsibilities, featuring Thomas Berry, Peter Barnes, co-founder of Working Assets, and it'll be followed later by a panel of respondents featuring Andrew Kimbrell. Right now, it's time for After Dark, WRPI's calendar of community events. We're going to make it short and sweet today so we can get right back to the show. This evening, there will be a artist lecture and opening reception, beginning at 4 o'clock, artist lecture by Ed McCartan for his show Paintings from a Thin Place at the Yates Gallery, J. Spencer and Patricia Standish Library, 2nd floor, Siena College, 515 Loudon Road, Loudonville, New York. My good friend Ed McCartan. I'm looking forward to being there myself. Again, artist lecture by Mr. McCartan at this Thursday night, October 2nd, 4 p.m., room L26 at the Yates Gallery, J. Spencer and Patricia Standish Library, 2nd floor, Siena College, 515 Loudon Road, Loudonville, New York, followed by the opening reception from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Also tonight, Minds and Machines, Creative Visions, Creative Minds, Creative Machines, the 6th Annual Minds and Machines First Year Study Lecture Series, Fall 2003, at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, free and open to the public. Thinking Twice Before Leaving Humanity Behind, with Bill McKibben. That's this Thursday night, October 2nd, 2003, at 7:30 p.m. in the Sage Auditorium, room 3303 at Sage Laboratory. Bill McKibben, the author of The End of Nature, and scholar at residence at Middlebury College, looking into the questions of what's going on with the modern technologies, bio, nano, and/or information technology, and hoping that we all think twice before leaving humanity behind. That's the name of the lecture. It's tonight, 7:30 p.m. I've seen Mr. McKibben myself more than once, and I think I'll go there too. After that, I'm probably going to head on down to the Arts Center of the Capital Region. Why? Because tonight, Ulrich Maas comes to us all the way from Germany, and it says here that the folks at Impulse Response are pleased as punch to have him, for he will be performing a version on amplified cello of Lou Reed's influential and controversial Metal Machine music. Got a piece of Lou Reed music in the background. I'm not using Metal Machine music. It really wouldn't work well that way. In fact, this is the only version with Reed's seal of approval that Ulrich Maas performs. So you know it is going to be on. Just reading this, folks. The show begins at 8 p.m. The admission is not free, but it's cheap. For more information about the series, please contact the Impulse Response Hotline at area code 518-281-3206. For more information about the Arts Center Capital Region, 265 River Street in Troy, New York, please visit http://www.artscenteronline.org or simply call 273-0552. Someone's calling me right now. I'll try to get to you soon, because we're going to be going back to Thomas Berry momentarily. Also tonight at the Troy YWCA, beginning at 6 p.m., the monthly meeting of the Hudson Mohawk Independent Media Center begins at around 6 o'clock. And I know I'll be at that one too. I'm just a busy guy tonight. But that's after dark for now. And for those of you who listened to the IMC radio report last night, that I did and called up and said kind things, thank you very much. I had to run out of the studio at the time. We are now going to go back to the collected thoughts of Thomas Berry. This is the second week that I'm doing this. It's a 4-part series. I want to thank our good friend Gary Goldberg for letting us run over in time a bit last week and this week as well. And now the collected thoughts of Thomas Berry. Listen, please.
Now, this is the kind of substitution that tends to be made. I remember once in Germany, when I was there once for a number of years, that I was with a German family at one time that I used to visit, and the mother prided herself on reading English, and she used to get publication from America, and one of them was a religious publication, and had the prayers for children on a record. And her first instinct was, is that good? A child should learn to pray by the immediacy of a human person and a human voice. And if you put this on a record and the child learns that way, then there's something missing. The most profound aspect of education is lacking. So there is a tendency of humans to drift off into the Technozoic order, and that's the choice that has to be made, and where the future will be determined, whether we're going into a Technozoic world or whether we're going to Ecozoic world. And the difference is largely between going into an electronics chemical world or whether we are going into an organic world of physical intimacy. The physical order has to be kept. And whereas we tend to look upon what we call a spiritual mode of the transphysical order and develop a certain a sense of suspicion of the physical order as not having the meaning that the spiritual order has, we are going to have to recover our sense of the grandeur and the importance of the physical mode of being and of the physical experience. Because once that goes, it's the only way in which we really become intimate with the personal element or with the spiritual or with the sacred element of things in some real way. Otherwise, there's a certain ephemeral aspect of our other experience, and it tends to enter into triviality. So this is what I sometimes call the great work. And keeping this authentic is what is involved. Now, I sometimes give expression to this in terms of what I refer to as the historical mission of our times. First of all, though, the educational process, and children particularly, need to feel that they are called to a great work. This is what inspires. It's a challenging, it's an adventurous process. It's a process that calls to the deepest capacities of the human soul. And children particularly need to experience this.
Thomas, when you describe this situation, the impasse and the destruction that's taking place all around the planet, this is being dynamized by a millennial vision that has worked its way out in different ways, in Russia one way, in America another way. How does your vision here about the ecozoic relate to this question of millennial drive?
Well, what I'd like to say here is that the millennial vision, once it enters into history, cannot be taken out of history. In other words, that's a perennial thing. We will always be driven by millennial vision. It cannot be erased from the Western mind or from the dynamism of Western civilization. We have had a vision that it's possible to do something about the human condition. Now, our trouble is arising from the fact that we have tried to deal with the human condition in an improper way by devastating the planet in favor of the human. But now we have to envisage the millennial vision as having its fulfillment in throughout the planet Earth. It has to be an achievement of the planet Earth, not simply of humans, and it has to be a new era of interaction between the human and the earth. In fact, it was described from the beginning in terms of the trees giving forth their fruits 12 times a year and so forth, an extravagant depicting of the millennial vision in terms of the blossoming of the planet Earth. So this vision of a wonder world, actually this has changed in our times, in our technological society, has found its expression in terms of wonder world. It has been turned into the Disney vision. The Disney world is really a modern phase of wonder world derived from this millennial vision, but transformed into plastic and into make-believe and to a humanly contrived creation. In that sense, it has had, I think, a rather undesirable influence on our society, because to an extent it satisfies in a in a trivial way, but an ultimately unsatisfying way. But the basic idea is that we must deal with this vision. Now, the Ecozoic era must constitute the vision. The Ecozoic era is my sense of the direction in which we achieve our expression of the millennial vision. So that this entrances at a profound level. Now, a person might say that it takes the place in the great epic stories of the goal that is to be achieved. In the Homeric thing, it's that wandering until a person gets home and this achieves a certain serenity there. In Virgil, the vision is in what the empire is called to do, to achieve the great peace among the nations. In the medieval period, it was symbolized in the great cathedrals when the divine and the human would achieve a certain intimacy with each other. In Bacon's time, it was to be achieved through our control of nature, and we have put it into an industrial context. We've been put it into the electronic expression. But now we need a new expression that I call the Ecozoic era, and it has an inherent fascination, I think, that can evoke the effort that is needed, but it will have to be presented to and made available to, particularly, I think, to younger children in a way that they can appreciate. They have to have an education that responds to that need.
Yeah, and that your sense is that this will dynamize the human venture in a way of healing the whole Earth community.
Yeah, that's the basic direction that things must move into. We must once again take up a achievement of a great destiny. And that is what we're called to, because we have to have enormous psychic energy in order to bring about the changes that are needed. Because we're going to have to exercise a certain deliberate giving up of some of the extravagances that we have at the present time. We need to go back to a more integral way of agriculture, a more integral way of travel. For instance, we've got to go back to things like walking or bicycling or something much more elementary than the automobile and the airplane. There simply will not be that much fuel available. But apart from whether or not the fuel is available, the restoration of the intimate relationship of humans with each other is going to require a return to a simpler way of achieving. But the single most difficult thing to appreciate is this cannot be done by some process moving from on top, so to speak. It cannot be organized from above or institutionally and then somehow imposed on the society. It's something that must begin at a very elementary basis of human life and then grow into its larger expression.
task, it just takes a little amount of energy to complete it. But if you have a vast task, like the creation of an ecozoic era, which is on the order of a planetary task, it seems to me you would need the activation of an energy that's just as vast, just as deep. And so I think this question of activation of psychic energy is just extremely important, and I think many people would love to hear you reflect on that.
Well, what we're about is something that traditionally has been evoked by the great religious movements of history. This we might consider as a meta-religious dynamic. That is, the task itself is beyond what any single religion seems to be able to evoke. And this task itself of fulfillment of the universe has a profound religious dimension, but not exactly as we've known religions in the past. It's just like economics. We need an economy that we've never known in the past. We need an education that we've never known in the past. So we need a dynamic of history that we've never known in the past. And this is a continuation of the millennial vision of the Western world. It's a continuation of the dynamics of people everywhere, where they have interpreted the human venture in cosmological terms. In the Chinese world, the emperor had as his primary role the coordination of human affairs with the cosmological order. And the only thing the emperor had to do was to sit on the throne and face south. And the whole universe functioned, the human in harmony with the heavens. And, of course, this was locked into the cycle of the seasons for planting and harvesting. It was locked into the solstice celebrations, the equinox transitions in the cosmological order. So the human was always interpreted in its cosmological context, so that it participated in the energy of the universe. We have to learn to be dynamized by the energy of the evolutionary process, that is, of an emergent universe going through a sequence of irreversible transformation episodes. We are at one of those episodes at the present time. And the future is not something we create. The future is something that is created by the universe, particularly in its form of the planet Earth. So it's a question of the universe and all the components of the universe entering into this new phase. But in this new phase, the human has a special role because the human has brought about this phase. The human has been the principal instrument in terminating a former phase and will have an essential role in renewing the total course of Earth development. Now, as regards the sources of energy, first I might say that the source of energy is, where's the child get the source of energy when you see a child, a 5-year-old, 6 or 7-year-old, who's taken out for an outing, and you see a child just running across the field. See a child just excited by where the child is. Just the exuberance of being there draws the energy, the physical energy and the psychic attention and the fulfillment that the child experiences. Well, that is a primordial human response to the universe about us. We are in danger of losing that sensitivity to the universe. And so that What is needed is to experience this in its evolutionary phase. Formerly, this was in the ever-renewing seasonal sequence of transformations. We need to appreciate these moments of grace as experienced in the moments of transformation, of evolutionary transformation that have taken place from the very first flaring forth of the universe. The formation of the galaxies was one of the central moments when the basic laws of the physical universe were set in order. And what happened then was extremely important in terms of the later development of life, the later development of consciousness. There's a direct influence and determination that was taking place there that made it possible for all these later things to happen. So what is important is that we become familiar with and identified with this emergent time developmental process that we refer to as evolution, the sequence of changes. So we have to reach back into the cosmological order and learn to set up conditions in which these dynamics can function, because at the present time we can to a certain extent block some of these creative forces of the universe, or we can assist in making them efficacious. So the future energy that we will need must be our excitement with the universe and our capacity to celebrate. I interpret the universe as primarily a celebration. The birds sing, the flowers bloom, the fish swim, the trees grow, the bees gather honey, the butterflies pollinate, and the whole process is a celebratory process. So what I would suggest is that it's this type of excitement that's needed to ally physical and psychic human energy with the energies of the universe. And consider this as a special moment of grace, because transformation moments are considered moments of grace. What's a moment of grace? It's a period when a special creative process takes place that so transforms the universe that it's never the same again. Such a moment was the discovery of photosynthesis, when one form of life developed that could take the energy of the sun and the inanimate substances of Earth and create organic matter. That I would consider a moment of grace. Now, another moment of grace would be the coming of the flowers. The development of the higher forms of mammalian life depended on the food supply and the concentrated proteins that came from the flowering plants and grasses. And so this moment when flowers first appeared is something. Right now we gather flowers in the springtime. We're excited by the springtime renewal of flowers. But just think of a time when there was only greenery, the great fern growths that occupied the planet. And then flowers began to blossom. And a new episode of new possibilities came into being as regards the total destiny of the planet Earth. New possibilities for plant life and also for animal life and for human life and life of the human intelligence. New possibilities for religion, new symbolisms for art, new excitement of existence. all this became possible then. So we need celebrations that would celebrate these moments of grace, the moments of transition. And it's celebrations that give us that excitement with existence that supplies the energies that we need to satisfy ourselves to a degree in our psychic or interior life that will enable us to withdraw from the destructive processes that we're involved in at the present time. To withdraw from these destructive processes is going to be a very severe process. Now, there's another source of psychic development is what may be called the great symbolisms of the past. We have the symbolism of the stories where innocence betrayed is rescued by the heroic endeavor of some of the major figures in the literature of the world. This provided an archetypal expression of the heroic deeds that humans are called to. We do heroic deeds in times of war. We do heroic deeds in protecting families. We do heroic deeds when a community is threatened. And now we are called to a heroic deed of a new dimension. Never before has there been such a need for heroism, what may be called the great work that's before us. And this, I think, of its nature, is capable of fascinating, capable of drawing forth the energies that are needed. So these would be some of the sources of the energy that we need.
When you think of say, young people who, in a certain sense, would be deeply activated by this kind of vision, what are some of the ways in which they are kept from hearing this? And I mean, in this sense, that is that even if a young mind or an older mind is drawn away from the structural processes, there's a change of psychic structure almost is necessary to respond.
Well, I think they are kept away from it to some extent by the trivialization of contemporary life and the illusion of the great work that is associated with business. Their models become the great business or the great inventors or the great achievements in this order. But it's also the role of sports. Sports at the present time is tending to become a preoccupation and has become the ritual celebration of our times. Things like the Super Bowl, things like these contests, even the golf things that draw so many people. These activities tend to take on exaggerated dimensions in a society because they have no fulfillment in a more normal, creative way.
Thomas, this question of the heroism of our time, without question, it has to do with this great work. And in the past, as you say, this heroism would be activated in young people to go forth and to save or to protect innocence. But oftentimes that would be involved with war, and it's easy to get excited about a war. Do you have any thoughts on this challenge of making available to young people a sense of heroism with the great work? Does it have to do with somehow seeing in the particular the immensity of the whole in every particular task that's before? Or how do you think about that?
Well, I think of it in terms of the fact that the ideal of heroism has been stolen from our youth, in the sense that the heroic persons of our times are those that destroy the planet. The heroic people have drawn off into great business ventures and into inventions that dominate the planet and devastate. There's the difficulty of rethinking heroism that moves in the opposite direction, that moves toward the protection of natural systems over against the intrusion of the human system. Well, this is the great difficulty, is something that depends on people having an experience of the wonders and the preciousness of the natural world when they don't have experience of the natural world any longer. So it's getting increasingly difficult for people to know what they're missing. I sometimes say that I have to shake people, as it were, to stay awake. Know what you're losing. They don't know what they're losing. People don't see the stars. And if they talk about saving the great forest of the West, then it's on economic terms. It's, or you're going to keep people from doing their job, or you're going to keep the corporation from making money. Well, there are heroic people that will block this by standing in front of bulldozer or chaining themselves to some of these machines, or doing heroic tasks of that nature. Greenpeace that does heroic tasks. The Sea Shepherd that puts themselves in between the whaling vessels and the whales, or the sea mammals, and protect that way. So we do have models of people that do this very dramatic work. It's been difficult, but many of them go to prison over this, and many of them really put their lives in the line.
And I see, too, in a sense, when you talk about the other source of energy in terms of fear, as you're speaking, I begin to get a sense of how horrible the image would be that your mind is colonized. So that if you're a person and you have a sense of even your very ideals, your heroic ideals, those are false ideals. Yeah. That sense of it'd be something like an older idea of damnation or imprisonment.
Well, that's where the problem is, in the sense that the great work, say, of India, their great work was basically a work of transforming the human orientation toward transcendence. They had their heroic epic in the Mahabharata. They had their heroic story in the Ramayana, where Rama is dispossessed from the throne and wanders until he is able to come back and resume a proper rule over the people. And that story of Rama is the greatest epic, the greatest heroic story of Asia. It shows up in almost every country of Asia. Now, everybody has these heroic stories. Just like we have the Homeric stories, we have the Song of Roland, which celebrates the battle of Christians defending the European world against the invasion of the Muslim world up through Spain. So to get an idea of the heroic task is something new, and it has to be evoked by some type of an experience that people have. Now, take myself, for instance. It was evoked in me when I was quite young, and I don't know how it happened, but by the time I was 8, 9 years old, I saw the roads being paved. I saw the intrusions of the automobile. I saw the commercial spirit coming into North Carolina, into the small place where I was. And I immediately as a child, reacted against the commercial spirit. The South tried to reestablish itself after the Reconstruction, after the Civil War. It tried to do it as an agrarian society, but then this country developed this mystique after the Civil War. The last 30, 40 years of the 19th century is when this changed in this country, or at least took on the industrial mode. The urban life developed in the 90s, in the 1890s, when America became an urban society. And when the modern corporation developed, the modern industry, realism came in. The romanticism that was associated with the transcendentalist movement of the 19th century was considered trivial. You had to be a realist, and that's where we get the Sinclair Lewis novels about the realism of the business world. And you get some of the other writers at that time. You get Upton Sinclair, who wrote the critique of the jungle, of the livestock and the meat industry in Chicago. And you also get the first monumental corporation in Standard Oil. And that had to be broken up. It became such a heavy controlling establishment that it had to be broken up by a court order. It was largely under the influence of Ida Tarbell, who wrote the story. Well, all this was happening, and when I was young, the South had decided that it had to move from an agrarian society to an industrial commercial world. And North Carolina decided that it was going to be the foremost state in the South in getting into the commercial world. So by the early 20s, the 1922, by the time I was 8 years old, somehow I began to feel this. And just something that I didn't like. I saw it was developing, and I began to look for a way out of it. And so I didn't know quite what to do about it, but then I knew that I had to think my way through, that it was something that would require a thought inside. It wasn't something that you could remedy immediately. So I started what might be called, everybody has a heroic way, my heroic way. And my heroic way was to get out of the total public life of the society at the time into a monastery where I could think through what was the urgency of my lifetime, what I could do that would give my life meaning, and that would have meaning not simply as regards myself. I wanted to serve a cause. And I identified the cause not simply as social cause, but I saw that the difficulty was deeper than the social cause. It had to do with the devastation that was taking place in the life systems of the continent. And so, in that sense, I had experiences, though I had experiences of woodland and streams and of the natural world. I don't know what people do that don't have experiences of that nature, and how they would feel the intimacy and feel the urgency of creating something. Now, I didn't have the least idea what would be the positive content. I knew what I didn't like. I didn't know how I could do anything else than save what needed to be saved. The birds, I saw the trouble that the birds were in, the streams, the meadows, and I saw a saving thing. But I didn't know or even begin to see the order of magnitude of what the whole thing was all about. So that would be my story. And I think something of that has to be the story of an age.